Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Catherine Chan. I'm a director at Galerie Lelong & Co. in New York. I would like to welcome you to the 23rd conversation in our series, Galerie Lelong Dialogues. Today's conversation is held on occasion of Kate Shepard's solo exhibition, ABC and Sometimes Why, which is on view through Saturday, February 8th. I'm honored to introduce today's speakers and to briefly share about them. If you'd like to learn more, please refer to our website for their full biographies. Kate Shepard. Kate Shepard's decades-long exploration of perspectival space investigates the relationship of paintings to their environments, the various reflective surfaces establishing a spatial discourse across the panel, the viewer, and the gallery space. Using methods such as hand painting thin linear constructions and interrupting the surface by sanding the glossy enamel, Shepard incorporates geometric forms in her work that imply dimensional space on the two-dimensional surface. Being situationally reactive to light and movement, the paintings take on sculptural characteristics in their constant change. The artist's oeuvre also encompasses works on paper, which examine her constantly evolving exploration of color. Shepard has exhibited at museums and galleries across the United States and Europe since 1994, and her work is featured in numerous museum collections, including the Art Institute of Chicago, Buffalo AKG Art Museum, Baltimore Museum of Art, Los Angeles County Museum of Art, Museum of Fine Arts Boston, Museum of Fine Arts Houston, and the Phillips Collection in Washington, D.C. Isabelle Dervaux is an art historian and curator. From 2005 to 2023, she was the Aquavella curator and department head of modern and contemporary drawings at the Morgan Library and Museum in New York. Previously, she held curatorial positions at the National Gallery of Art and the National Academy Museum in New York. She holds a PhD in art history from the Institute of Fine Arts at NYU and a master's degree from the University of Paris-Sorbonne. She has curated numerous exhibitions on 20th century European and American art, including Surrealism USA in 2005, Roy Lichtenstein, The Black and White Drawings 2010, Dan Flavin Drawing 2012, Subliming Vessel, the drawings of Matthew Barney, 2013, Dubuffet Drawings in 2016, George Boslett's 6 Decades of Drawings in 2022, Entrance to the Mind Drawings by George Kondo in 2023, and Ferdinand Hodler Drawings in 2023. She has published extensively on modern and contemporary art, notably essays on Surrealism, Joseph Albers, Arshel Gorky, Philip Guston, Helen Frankenthaler, Cy Twombly, and Tom Wesselman. At the end of the talk, we will open up the discussion to a brief question and answer session. This talk will also be recorded and published later on our website. Without further ado, Kate Shepard and Isabelle Dervaux.
Thank you, Catherine. That was
nice. Thank you, Catherine. First, is the sound okay? Can you hear well? It's too low. Can you adjust it? Is it better now? Okay, so good afternoon, and thank you for coming, and good afternoon, Kate. Let's start with the most obvious thing, maybe when we come into the exhibition, which is the type of surface of the painting, which is so glossy. So when one is used to oil on canvas, one wonders, what is this? So perhaps we can start with, what do you use, what support, what paint, and why?
I use Dutch enamel paint for years, and I started to use enamel paint because I had a painting in Boston and 2 handprints became evident, and I had to redo it, so I thought I would use something more robust.
Is this a type of paint that is made for
Cabinets,
cars or refrigerators or?
Cabinets and doors. So European doors, you'll recognize that rich color.
So, but you said the reason is to not have handprints on them, but I suppose there is more than that.
There's more than that. I think that like the sexiness of the paint is really important to me. How it's so changes in all the light, and I love that it reflects the space. So there's this element of unpredictability and lack of control in how the paint is just sort of interacts with the viewer in the room.
So you are looking for the reflective surface. You want it to be reflective.
I want it to be there, and I think it's a good foundation for the delicacy of the line. And sometimes you can't see the delicacy of the line because there's so much reflection happening, but I like the shyness of the line. I like that you have to sort of go towards it and see it close up in order to parse the entire image.
So we'll get to the line, but first, still on the reflection, to what extent then do you want to control the reflection that will happen on the paintings?
I don't control it, but when I am in my studio taking a photograph, my favorite thing is when the window is on the left and you can see like this noticeable presence of a window in the painting, and it kind of reminds me of like Vermeer's North Light window on the left. But I like it when all the different paintings reflect in the surface as well, so that there's this element of architecture and perspectival space on the surface.
So there will not necessarily be a window where you hang the paint, where
No.
the painting will be hung. Have you ever thought of just painting the reflection of a window
Yeah.
on the canvas? So then it'll, I mean, not on the canvas, but on the painting, so it will be there?
Yes, that was last show. I definitely did that because somebody came to my studio, a young artist, and she said, "What's with these reflections?" And I felt like I was really put on the spot. And she said, "Why do you use this shiny paint?" So I decided to make paintings about what that reflection was. So I took a blank panel and I took a photograph of all the different things that were reflected in the surface, and then I printed that back on. And so I did a collection of paintings that look exactly like the reflections in the studio. So you'd have the fluorescent lights on or off, you had the window, you had a reflection of the entire studio, and you had a reflection of the paintings in the studio.
So that was a particular body of work, but no, that does not apply to what's in here.
No, this is happenstance.
But in the installation, I mean, I don't know if you or the gallery did the installation, but to what extent were you taking into account what reflection there would be?
None.
You're leaving it to
chance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and invariably you'll see yourself in the painting. But I'm so focused on the line and I'm so focused on composing to the best that I can that I don't really think about the reflection. But that's the question I get most asked.
Because you can't avoid it.
You
and
can't
if
avoid it.
When it comes to reproducing the paintings, let's say in a catalog, you need to have the official photograph of the painting.
Right.
Do you choose which reflection will be in it, or do you try to have no reflection? I suppose the photographer would try to take it without reflection.
Yes, and they're unfortunately really good at it.
But so what do you prefer?
I would love for you to see a reflection in the painting so that it has the life that I want it to have. Because there's really a duality to the painting. There's the paint, and then there's the composition.
So the reflection also has to do with the viewer being seen. It's not only the windows and the lights, but it's also, as you mentioned, whoever is looking at the painting. Mm-hmm. So the spectator sort of becomes part of it, right?
Right.
So now you also add an element of drawing, or I don't know how to call it, this white or dark if it's a light background. No, how do you come up with the motif that you are going to reproduce, and what?
I feel like the paintings are always based on my last favorite painting that I made, that I will kind of do a variation of that. And it's really hard to get grounded in a motif. And I do a lot of sketches, and I also sketch in SketchUp.
When you say sketches, first you mean with a pencil in a sketchbook?
Little doodles, and then I'll draw them in an architectural program and turn them in space until they are active and mysterious, and until you can feel a sense of like stasis. But I want them to be, to feel like they are sculptural, like this. I turned in space until I felt a certain way about it.
And so all the various construction, let's say, or I don't know how to call them, because they're really not figures, but that's why I use the word motif, but white elements, whatever. The idea is do you connect them to sculpture in the space, or how do you see them? How do you conceive them?
I see them as plausible ideas that I could see in space and that I could read from top to bottom and from bottom to top, and that I feel like the only one in this room that doesn't have gravity is the red one over there that hangs, that is suspended, but the other ones I really want to have a sense of gravity, like a standing figure or a standing sculpture.
And you often say you want to create a space that would be credible.
Yes.
Why is that so important? Could it be imaginary?
No, because the more credible it is, the more you have a sense of depth. And if it's made up, I feel like it would be too much on the surface of the painting, or too much about the 2D surface. I'm really trying to move into a three-dimensional space.
Okay, since we are in the line, also you decide on the final configuration, let's say, with the SketchUp program, right? And but then you paint them by hand.
Right.
They're not
etched
sort of
in.
Diagram or
Right.
So how do you paint them?
I use a little brush with oil paint, and I have a stick that steadies my hand, which is why the lines are so straight. There's some aberration, but mainly I like it to be straight because I want you to really focus on the composition as opposed to the expressive quality of the line. You feel where the line starts and where it ends, but apart from that and the little wiggles there, I think that they're pretty diagrammatic.
Especially from far, but when you look closely, that's where you see these imperfection, or I think what Joseph Albers called the breathing of the line.
Oh, wow.
When a single line has different thickness.
Okay.
And which is not as strong as an expressive line, but a line that is a bit alive, or
right.
Is that the character you're trying to give to the line? Or?
Sometimes the line is dead, and I'll have to redo it. Yes. Yes, I made a painting the other day, and it was too even. There was no sense of genesis about where it started, and there was no unevenness. So I did it again, and it just came to life.
And the color, we spoke about the paint, but not the color.
Right.
How do you pick your color?
I want the color to counterbalance the image, so that if there's a oddness to the image, sometimes I'll use a color that's more joyous, like the green painting down the hall.
You find green is joyous?
Yes, like this lime greening. And that painting is so obvious and flat and seemingly flat. It's not flat, but it reminds me of Alber's double composition in the Homage to the Square with the two rectangles coming up. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to counterbalance that seriousness with an acidic lime green.
So you choose your color after you have decided what kind of line drawing you are going to put in the painting.
Yeah.
So that they go together.
Right. Or so that they don't go together.
And besides the figure, I mean, do you want those colors? They seem to me pretty artificial. I mean, by that, not obvious, although you mentioned the lime green, but I would not have thought that it was color of the line. You try to have either a cultural or natural reference in your colors?
There's definitely nostalgic in these colors, and it reminds me of like old toys or old plastic sometimes, or old book covers that I have, and I feel like I have to have a personal memory of that color in order to go forward.
But that would be something that would not be obvious to the viewer.
No.
This is just your own personal relationship with your painting.
Right.
Because even in the titles, do you refer to that? Your titles are sometimes a little mysterious. Let's see, one of them is called, the purple one over there is called Bonfire Kiss.
Well, the kiss is referring to the sweetness of the color, but the bonfire is referring to the fact that the forms kind of come in towards each other, sort of how you would build a wood stack in order to burn it.
So is that a title you came up after you finished the painting, looked at it and thought, oh, it looks like a bonfire and it's a sweet color?
Yeah, somebody came to my studio and saw the pink of a different painting and said it's like a kiss, and that stayed with me.
I would not have associated necessarily purple with the kiss, maybe more pink, but and then this one is deepest blue, precarious.
Yeah, I think that sculpture to me looks like it's almost toppling over.
So that would be more descriptive. Since we are in the title, could you explain the title of the exhibition?
Sure.
ABC and sometimes why?
Yeah. I had a really hard time thinking about the title of this show because I felt like there was no storytelling or no narrative or no sort of like sociological conceit. I wanted it to be about parts of language that didn't come together necessarily, but that was elements. The elements of language are letters, but the letters don't necessarily come together to tell a story. And the why is the funkiness, or the unexpected quality, or the personal quality, because they're not just building blocks that are regular squares. They're building blocks, or some of them are building blocks that are quirky. And so it's not just minimalist art, because there's this essay, I think by Lucy Lepard, I'm not sure, that's called ABC. Did I get the name right? And so I don't mean this to refer to minimalist art, but I do use the language of geometry consistently.
Maybe there should have been a little text explaining this title.
Well, I would hope that people would have a sense of like the elemental.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well, maybe the reference to the geometry comes through when looking at the works and reading the title. You did also a wall painting or wall drawing, I don't know, wall painting,
Wall
I guess.
painting, yeah.
And so that's a different kind of paint to start with.
Right.
You didn't do it glossy.
No, it's Benjamin Moore, and I feel very a kinship to utilitarian paint as opposed to artist paint. So I use that in the sculptures, just plain stain. I use that in the paintings, and I don't use canvas on the paintings. I don't want there to be a reference to regular oil painting. I want it to feel like the wall. I'm really interested in paint on a wall. So this is Benjamin Moore paint, and it's sometimes a little glossier and sometimes a little bit more matte, just because I used as little paint as I could from the store and used tints and used the paint from the gallery, the white paint from the gallery to mix. And the gallery's paint was matte, and my paint had a semi-gloss to it.
So that explains the surface. How did you, so this is a site-specific work.
Right.
How did you conceive it? What did you have in mind? Or?
I wanted it to refer to architecture, but I didn't want it to be a 4-sided room, so I expanded that into an 8-sided room. And then I combined these 8-sided shapes to overlap one another in order for them to be more chromatically interesting. And I decided on the green because it was the only color that really excited me. I had it lavender, I had it gray, I had it blue for a while, and then the gray the gray sort of took over the left side a little bit, but I was excited by that green.
Were you trying the colors on SketchUp also?
Yeah.
Or actually, no?
Yeah, SketchUp.
But in the end, the green is rather different. Well, there is a lime green over there, but on the whole, it has a different feeling from the other paintings in the sense that, to me, it's a bit more landscapey. It's a little more nature than the other colors.
Leafy, yeah.
Yeah. Did you, were you conscious of that or no?
Well, I was always told that it's hard to sell green paintings.
Yeah, the Alberts, the greens are those that sell the less, the red ones are those that sell the most, yeah, almost easily, yeah.
So I just, it was
So
my
you
own
decided
like
to do
little
it green?
personal defiance, I guess.
But now if we think of wall painting in reference to Sol Lewitt, who did a lot of them, they can be done, even if he's not there, they can be, he gives the instructions and they can be redone. Is that the same with yours? Can you conceive that later on or somewhere else, someone based on your instruction could redo the painting?
I have a maquette, and it needs to be measured on the wall. So we did it with, an assistant and I did it with threads, oddly enough. So we made a grid of threads on the wall and then measured out from the grid of threads. And I don't know whether this could be done after I die. I think that if Adelie, my helper, is alive, she could certainly do it. But I was the one that matched all the paint.
Uh-huh. You mean in terms of determining the exact colors?
Yeah, because there's no, obviously what suggests transparency is yet another color, is a new color. So I was the one that matched all those paints. Ideally, it would be a permanent installation so that I wouldn't have to come back after, after dying.
And could it be, would you conceive it the same in different colors? Because the green was for this particular space.
I think that my whole palette might change from year to year, my whole desire.
Oh, more based on time rather than space.
Based on my taste, yeah. I'm about to do one that's pink and gray, and I'm excited about that, like really light pink.
Something which is new in this exhibition are the sculptures. You may not see very well from where you are sitting. There are two here and one over there. So this is a new body of work. The sculpture.
Yeah. They're all based on shards of paper that are the scraps of paper from another project. They're the negative shapes from a project. And so I kept those since 2016, and made little wooden maquettes from them, and then decided that they looked sort of like public sculptures. So I made them larger, not the size of like a plaza, but the size that's appropriate to this space. And what was fun was that they had to fit, I wanted each pair to fit on a piece of plywood. So it was a game, like a puzzle, to fit them on a piece of plywood and then latch them together. There's no fastening, there's no screws or nails. They just sort of like latch together. And I love that because it's like a puzzle and they come apart and you can put them together without much instruction.
And they seem to me to relate somewhat to the white motifs on the paintings, no? The idea of a planar construction that creates a space. Or...
Definitely. I think all the work in this show is based on planes that suggest a space, whether they mean sculpture or a public space, and like the watercolors in the other room, how they overlap and make a space like this. So, what was your question?
It was about the sculptures.
Yeah.
And how they relate to the white motifs on the paintings. But you did not conceive them the same way, because you were starting with these remnants. Or... Remnants,
exactly. But they were propped up on my table for years. I was looking at them for years.
So they were remnants from what?
From a collage sculpture, collage work that I did years ago. I did them over and over again.
In cardboard? In wood?
In screen printed paper. So I'd cut them out, and then these were the negative shapes. And I saved them, and I had them made in light wood, and then I made them in plywood recently.
And how did you decide on the plywood?
Because I wanted it to be like a puzzle, and I wanted it to be kind of like a toy, like a construction toy.
But we see you preserve the wood grain in the way you, I was going to say painted, but more tinted them, really.
Right, I stained them, because I wanted them to have a really warm quality as opposed to something tinny and cold.
And you made them the size, because you were talking about public sculpture, but if they were public sculpture, they would have to be even bigger.
Huge.
Can you conceive them even bigger?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
You made them for the size of the gallery?
For the size of the gallery and the size of the plywood. I think that if they were public sculptures, they'd have to be made out of metal, for sure.
Then you would lose the wood grain.
I would gain
or you would paint it.
Yeah, I think I would gain the enamel paint, but I would lose the wood grain. Then you'd have that shine. I like the way Robert Grosvenor's yellow sculpture is painted at Art Omai. It's yellow and it's beautiful. So I would aspire to that kind of a thing.
And the works on paper that are in the other room, they seem to me to relate more to this type because of the transparency and overlapping of the planes. Right. So how did those come about, the works on paper? Because it's a new body of work as well.
It is, and when you came to my studio, you looked at the beginning of this work, which was really nice.
The black and white.
The black and white pieces. But I wanted to maintain these as like sculptural images, and I was frustrated in the paintings at the time that they didn't overlap, that they were discrete shapes, and so I wanted to be able to overlap them, and that was good for watercolor. It's magic the way that second or third color manifests.
So when they overlap, the color is actually the superposition of two coats of the same. It's not a different color like here.
Right, right.
So it's a different process.
Right.
And the black and whites that you had done initially, if I recall, you were doing them in homage to Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Right.
So how was that? I mean,
I finished,
what was the connection?
I guess I finished mourning her, and then I went on to making colored work. But for a while, I was so inspired by her black and white robe, and I was sad that she died. Now we've got mixed feelings about that, I know, because she should have quit earlier. But I was moved by that death, so I made black and white watercolors.
So have you made other works that have also references in the world in this way?
Yeah, this yellow painting is an homage, or not an homage, but like a thank you to a man in Israeli-occupied Palestine who has helped me since 2005 on computer stuff. But because of the war, he's just not interested in working. But he and I worked on that image together, and we sort of made it more funky than it had been originally. And so I wanted to thank him.
Does it appear in the title?
Yeah, it's
Which one is this?
It's the yellow one, too.
Light yellow for Annie's. And so let's see, we were in the references. Any other in the works that are here?
Just the one that's called Homage, because that's very much like a homage to Albers for me. But I didn't want to mislead the audience and think about Albers too much.
You sort of can't help it. I mean, not that it's in terms of resemblance, but in terms of thinking about the colors and whether they have a reference or not. You know, all the way Albers was always referring to colors as sound or cooking flavors, or you know, he had all these. And it seems that you also have things behind the colors that they refer to something for you.
And there's a reason I can't paint a teal painting, because it has a reference to me that I don't like exercise clothing, or like hospital materials, or there's, I keep trying to make a teal painting and counterbalancing it with an image, but it's just not working yet. So that's the last panel in the studio that's not painted because it's just too ugly to me.
And so what are some of your inspirations in terms of maybe in music or in...
In music, I like minimalist classical music. I like Steve Reich, and I also listen to like contemporary minimalist music, like Pansonic and Oval and Fortet, but mainly in the studio, I don't listen to music at all. I listen to ambient sounds. I listen to the cement factory.
The actual ones.
Yeah, yeah.
Not fake ambience.
Right, not Brian Eno. And I listen to all the photo studios are playing music, so I listen to their music. So it's sort of like the reflections. It's happenstance. I can't control it.
And does that play a role in your inspiration?
No, but it calms me down.
And in terms of art historical reference, we've mentioned more modern, but let's say when you go to the Met, what are the artists or the artworks that you are drawn to and that you like to look at again because they inspire you? Or
there's a Rodin head of Balzac that I like a lot, and that creates these really deep spaces of darkness, but he draws on the form in this beautiful way. The mustache and various lines on the face. And I'm interested in drawing in clay. It's just sort of like, I guess, drawing on surfaces. And I also like, I like looking at all the paintings that I used to copy. I used to go to the Met and copy paintings when you were allowed to do that. You just had to bring a canvas that was either 10% smaller or 10% larger than the original, and then use your easel and just show up and try to tune out the audience as much as possible, or like whoever was watching.
And what did you copy?
I copied Vermeer 3 times. I copied an El Greco portrait of an old man because the palette was so limited, and it was really magical to get the light with such a limited palette. And I copied the George de la Tour, Mary Magdalene with the candle.
The light. And you say those are still the paintings that you like to revisit?
I revisit those, and I also look at Frans Hals because I like his brushstrokes. I like his brushstrokes more than Rembrandt's brushstrokes because they're very alive and sort of alla prima.
Where are your brushstrokes? No, how do you explain this attraction to the brushstrokes? Doesn't translate into...
It doesn't, but I was a figurative painter for 6 years or so, or more, and that's the way I tried to paint. I tried to paint in a really honest way. Instead of like massaging the surfaces, I would lay down a brush. And I made my living doing portraiture for a while, and I drew and painted every day.
Mm-hmm. In fact, when you apply the color, the paint, you apply it with a brush, right?
I apply it with a brush, horizontally.
So they are barely visible, but I guess there are brush strokes. I mean,
you can see the ripple, because when I moved to Bushwick, I wanted to get away from my fumes, so I had them sprayed. And when I had them sprayed, they came back to the studio and they looked like cabinets. So I had to stop doing that. I had to start painting them again.
Is there anything else you wanted to mention about the works in the exhibition, or?
No, I'm happy to answer questions from the audience if we have any.
Should we take some questions from the audience? Yes?
So I'm curious about this. It sounds to me like there's almost a phenomenological approach to the way these paintings are, where it's so much about the experience. And you talk about space. And you talk about space. So it actually calls to mind not just Joseph Albers, but some more like mobile sculpture, hanging sculptures like Calder. They sort of, even though they're not angular, Calder sculptures have those, the early line drawing sculptures with the shadows. This has like some sort of spatial reference to that, and I was wondering if you can talk about if that is something that you think about at all.
Yeah, there's a drawing by Albers that looks like a rectangle standing up, but it doesn't make sense, and it's my favorite drawing of his. But as far as the sculptures are concerned, I really love those planar sculptures that move in space. And the one that he made that looks like eyeglasses, I don't know if you know that one that turns with writing on it. I'm interested in his sculptures very much. Calder, yeah.
Yeah, because there definitely has a feeling of that space, or that because you talk about the randomness, and it's definitely conveyed in these paintings.
Yeah, they're random until I freeze them in a space. Yeah. Daphne.
Hi, Kate. I love this show so much. I wondered if you would talk a little bit more about the genesis of the wall painting, and if and how your participation in the installation of the Bridget Pottery
Oh, when I installed the Bridget Riley at the Chinati Foundation, I learned to tape really well. And you have to really push the tape down in order to avoid getting like little bleeds. So I didn't seal this with matte medium, which is the usual trick with wall paintings. I just used the tape. And I love doing that. I had been doing wall paintings since before the Bridget Riley, but I love doing that piece. And her colors were so purposefully dissonant. So like I said about being inspired by the last work, I was commissioned by Rice University to do a piece, and it was an octagonal building, and that's where all these octagons kind of started. So this is the third octagonal space that I've made. And I think the next work I do is not going to be an octagon anymore.
What is it going to be?
It's going to be this floor with sliding walls, but the floor is really long and sticks out. You'll have to see it. It's Hi.
Hi. I was curious about the thin delicacy of the line, and there's a lot of tension with the kind of boldness of the color and surface.
Yeah.
And I wondered if you played around with that much, or you, like that was just felt right, or you wanted the fragility, or
The brush work has been consistent since 1999, I think, and I've used the same type of brush, and it's a Robert Simmons brush, and they went out of business, so I called all the Utrechts in the United States and got all the brushes. I have 137 left, and
Don't say that. People are going to ask you.
So I got a lifetime supply. But
never like.
I would never make I tried making a larger stroke, but it didn't feel like I missed the tension of it. I missed the thread-like quality of it. And so I've made screen prints with threads, and I put the thread on the ruby lift and then shot that so that the drawing was made out of threads. I like that delicacy a lot.
And it might relate to using the threads for the
Yeah, that was convenient too. It's a nice reminder.
and Fred Sandbagg's work.
Which I adore.
Yeah.
And the threads are really convenient, like when I'm auditioning a line on the painting and not knowing where to put it, I'll just put like a piece of thread and it looks exactly like the brushwork. I really don't think I'm ever going to change these lines.
Oh, you never know.
I never know.
Yeah?
Oren.
Can you say something about the journey of the figurative artist who migrates to the minimalism and imbues these images with some of the vocabulary of the figurative artist, and you describe the lines, shy lines, and you talk about these paintings really as if, in another way, it could be the portraits that you speak.
Definitely, they need to have a human presence. And I consider them, I talk about them in emotional terms when I'm making them, for sure. And I couldn't, like as far as figurative art is concerned, I couldn't do it anymore. The faces were so sad. And I really like to, I think it's because I really want to express a sense of timelessness. And I want to give that to the viewer. But when you do a portrait, it feels, it lacked expression. But I always wanted there to be a stance. Like I always wanted the standing figure to have like a posture, and that has carried me through. And Ham has a wall painting in his house, which I'm really happy about, which was from 2001.
Trying to picture these portraits, were they very representational and accurate?
They were very accurate, yeah. But I didn't do them in a fussy way. Like I said, I like for you to see the strokes. But they were very accurate, yeah. Oren.
There's something cool about the way all these colors look together in this space. None of them are the same. Did you have the other paintings around as you were painting these and sort of see the relationship to each other, think of them that way? Or was it just an accident?
I knew that there needed to be like a bag of candy in my hands when I was doing this. It needed to have a variety like M&Ms have. But I have 2 yellow paintings in the show, and I made an effort to separate them. There's one at the entrance. And I didn't want the sculptures to all be the same color.
Kate, could you speak to the dynamic of the kinetic aspect of the reflection in the equation in the paintings, as opposed to now with the sculpture, that the observer plays a different, instead of like in the mind's eye, as you enter the painting, you see a reflection and you move as the observer, and there's that equation that's dynamic. And now you're making the sculpture, and is there a thread of thought going through to the dynamic, how the sculpture relates to the viewer in a three-dimensional dynamic?
Well, I'm enjoying that you can circle around the sculpture. And sort of like that's sort of the way I conceive of a painting, by making a composition and then turning it in space. But I'm letting you do that with the sculptures.
So is that to say that you're, in the sense of making the paintings, you're actually imagining the viewer dynamically moving relative to the lines?
No, I'm giving you something that's static, yeah, and that feels resolved. I don't know if I answered your question.
But then the viewer is always the kinetic force.
The viewer is the kinetic force, yeah.
I mean, the way they balance on small points in there or in there, for instance, you have a sense that they could move.
Good. And then that pinwheel on top, I feel like is very mobile as well.
Yeah, so there is something a little, as Andrew said, kinetic in those shapes. They don't feel something really stable and, that is holding fixed.
I think that's why I used that base in the blue painting over there, because I wanted it to feel more like it's on a table and less like it's, as you would say, like mobile or and the red painting is definitely, I would definitely want you to feel like that could rotate if you wanted it to. It's called Party Over because it's sort of like a decoration that is deflated. Hey, Carol.
So Andrew was touching on the concept that you clarified as the viewer being a kinetic force. And I've been thinking about the architectural idea of prospect and refuge. And I'm wondering if you think about that too, that the viewer is both embraced and is in refuge in the painting, and then prospect being that it's as if we're looking out at ourselves in the painting.
I guess I could only say that the size is really relevant to your point, in that it's almost like you could be in that panel, and that could be a portrait of you as, I think, what you call a refuge. And it is the size of my arms, pretty much. So these paintings couldn't be a lot bigger, but also it has a nice relationship to the body.
Yeah, and in architecture, we're talking about the physicality of experience, not so much a mirror or a portrait of a person, but more like physically how you are both embraced in a secure way and
Right.
also looking out. Yeah. It's a physical experience rather than a visual experience.
I've had that experience with a Corbusier painting. That's an interesting slip. A Corbusier space, yeah.
Which one?
In the south of France, it's not the super famous one, but is it called La Touraine? And it's like a monastery, and it's rather big, and there are these portals, and the portals look like two-dimensional spaces, but you can go through them. I forgot the name of it.
There are no further questions. I'd like to thank you all for joining us. The exhibition is on until February 8th.
Thank you. Thank you, Kate.